But in the case of the Amish and food co-ops and little farmers markets selling food grown locally, why do they come in with guns drawn and slam people on the ground for no reason? You've seen the surveillance tapes on the news. Why do they have a year-long, $500,000 investigation of an Amish guy publicly selling legal milk? Why do they do all this? They do it as part of theater. That's how they fool these juries. Well, the federal juries are kept criminals on average who just stay on the jury and would do whatever they're told. That's why they have 98% of conviction rates. I mean, again, 98% of folks aren't guilty, ladies and gentlemen. And the old saying, better that 10 guilty men go free than one innocent man, go to prison. And now DNA is showing around a third of people on death rows turns out are completely innocent. And witnesses later come out, or they catch somebody with the body buried in their basement a decade later, and it's 100%. And still the states will fight to keep them in jail. I've seen that in Texas. Yeah, you're 100% innocent. We're going to try to keep you on death row. I mean, these are, because they can't ever let you get an inch on them. They've got to keep pushing and bending and twisting everything and normalizing it. But imagine all the crime going on. 11 years, full dossiers from inside Madoff's organization, people that had worked with him, of how the fraud was working, $100+ billion in fraud, and the FCC would do nothing. In fact, there's evidence that they were warning people on the inside, and then folks that were blowing the whistle were getting persecuted. It was multiple high-powered folks that blew the whistle. 11 years. Of course, the system is there to guard the high-level criminals. But look at this article on Ron Paul that Ron Paul wrote. It's up on Infowars.com. Ron Paul, the milk police. And I won't read the whole thing, but on April 20th, after a year-long undercover sting operation, again, he publicly was selling it for years, publicly selling it to private customers, totally legal. People go driving for miles around to get it. And they had a sting. And they do the sting so they can go to the jury and talk about a sting and a SWAT team raid and phrase it so the dumb domesticated jury, but this is a federal jury so they won't need that, will think it's illegal. And then they'll narrowly interpret some interstate commerce clause to fool the jury. Just like they used counterfeiting clause to convict von Nothouse. They just went in and said, issuing script that is in the likeness and meant to deceive, and then clearly that's not what it was. But see, they don't care. On April 20th, after a year-long undercover sting operation, armed federal agents acting on behalf of the Food and Drug Administration raid the business of Pennsylvania Amish farmer Dan. See, I try to hurry and then I start babbling. I need to take my time. On April 20th, after a year-long undercover sting operation, armed federal agents acting on behalf of the Food and Drug Administration raided the business of Pennsylvania Amish farmer Dan, Allgyer, Algier, to prevent him from selling his unpasteurized milk to willing, fully informed customers in Maryland. Federal agents wasted a whole year and who knows how many of our tax dollars posing as customers in order to catch the Amish farmer committing the, quote, crime, that's in quotes, of selling his milk. He was not tricking people into buying it. He was not forcing people to purchase it. And there had been no complaints about his product. See, no problems, no victim. These were completely voluntary transactions, but one that our nanny state federal government did not approve of, and so they shut down his business. The arrogance of the FDA and so many other federal agencies is simply appalling. These types of police state raids on peaceful businessmen, so reminiscent of our tyrannical federal drug war, have no place in free society. And he goes on. But see, Ron Paul's going from the position that this was wasteful and stupid. It's not stupid at all. This makes complete sense. If you go back into the 50s, Big Agra went in on record, and I've had historical guests on who've written books on the subject, and I've talked to old dairy farmers who witnessed it. Big agribusiness wanted to be able to sell tainted milk, because before, if you gave a cow too much growth hormone or worked on it too much or gave it other drugs, its udders would swell up. It would produce twice as much milk, but it would have blood in it, pus in it. The cows kick a lot of manure into it, and a real dairy farm, if that happened, you just had to dump out the entire milk and start over. Well, big agribusiness didn't want to do that. And they also wanted to be able to bring in new regulations that would shut down the smaller dairies. And, of course, the old milk wasn't pasteurized and was delivered fresh to your door. And the big grocery stores and others, they didn't want that. They wanted to industrialize it so they could feed you crud. It's the same thing with irradiating the meat now and the spraying the viruses on it to kill the bacteria so they could feed you rotten meat and get away with it. I want to finish up with this when we get back because it shows the industrialization of food production, but also how they put on these events to act like you're doing something criminal when you're not. There's a lot of things going on here, and Ron Paul goes with the angle that it's wasteful, it's stupid to spend a year, do all this undercover stuff. For an Amish guy's dairy, people pulled right up to and privately bought milk from him. Here in Austin, there are a whole bunch of little private dairies where you pull right up and buy it privately. It's a private sale. And to not have the regulators harass them, there's no law, but to not have the regulators harass them, you sign up to be part of the private club. Just like you can, in towns that are dry, I remember growing up in Rockwall, Texas when it was still dry, and we go to the Mexican food restaurant El Chico on Sundays, sometimes after church, and rarely did my dad want a beer. Not a big drinker, but sometimes he would want a beer, and they would say, "Man, we see your card." And he'd pull out his little club card to be able to get a beer. And so that's an example of the club card. You have a club card, to be engaged in private commerce with someone. That way you're not a commercial outfit. And what they did in the 50s and then in the 60s is they got regulations in place that for general distribution and sale and transport across state lines, you've got to have the milk homogenized. And they take it and they boil it and they heat it up, and it kills all of the live vaccines, the colostrum that's in it. And it totally changes. I mean, that was the old thing when a kid was sick. 100 years ago, they said, give them fresh milk that comes out of the cow, still warm, give it to your baby. When they're sick, give it to your child because it's full of antibodies and everything else. Well, they just boil it and cook it. But that's not why big agribusiness did it, so you wouldn't get those healthy things. That's the byproduct on the surface. It's that big agribusiness wanted to be able to ship milk 1,000 miles. They wanted the stuff to last for 2 weeks on the shelf. Before, people knew dairies that had the freshest milk. It was extremely rare. I've seen the statistics for any type of problems from milk. If it did have a problem, it wouldn't smell right or taste right. It was delivered fresh from the dairy in a matter of hours. That's why you had milkmen at first with horses and carriages and then with little trucks, because it was fresh milk. And Big Agri said, well, we're being killed by all the local dairies. They've got dairies in every town. It's a big business. How do we come in and knock out all these local dairies? Well, we get laws passed where they can't have fresh milk. It's got to be boiled, heated up, and that way we can knock them out. And it's the same thing now. 6 years ago, they passed a federal regulation allowing them to spray. You can just type in the search engine, bacteria-eating viruses sprayed on meat. And when it's covered in feces and blood and rotten, horrible conditions, most of the meat you eat, they just spray it with viruses that are a vaccine, a live vaccine, stewed up in big tanks to kill it, to eat the bacteria. But you still have the toxins from the bacteria. So it causes brain damage and a lot of other things. They then do other things like, of course, radiating. And most of the lunch meats and things you get now, and they don't have to even tell you, are radiated. And it destroys most of the food value, but the main reason is it allows them to sell stuff that is rotten. It kills the bacteria. See, before they had to throw that stuff out or put it in dog food. And then, of course, that causes all the problems in pets. So it's a way for big agribusiness to get away with murder. It's a way for them to shut down their competition. And that's why they spent tens of millions of dollars in 1 week alone last year trying to lobby was it 17 million or 14 million, I forget now, to get the food safety bill passed. Big Agra has food safety disasters. And then they turn around and say, we'll pass a food safety bill written by them to shut down farms and ranches, small ones, that if you look at the numbers, have the safest and cleanest food. Meanwhile, the big industrial capacity outfits, they are exempt from the new Food Safety Act that they lobbied to get put in. Just like Obama's friends are exempt from having to get health care for their employees, but everybody else is. So that's what they're doing here.